Hey guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board Franchise podcast. I've got a great guest with me today. Some of you guys probably know Kyle Barr is with StormGuard. They're a roofing franchise concept, and there's all sorts of cool stuff they do. I'll let him tell you a bit more about them in a second, but I want you to know why I've got him on the podcast, what we're going to be talking about today. So let me do a brief intro for him. Kyle's been in the StormGuard space for 13 years. He kind of grew up selling roofs at first and grew into an operations role when they started franchising. He's been involved in kind of building up. He's their VP of Ops now. He's been building up their processes and their franchise support systems for a decade or something now, Kyle?
Getting close to that now. It sure has. Yeah. I can't believe it.
Yeah. So guys, he's here because we're going to talk today about a common challenge a lot of franchisors have is, how do I help my franchise owners focus on the most important, the top priorities, rather than the loudest or the shiniest priorities? It's a common challenge, right? It creates all these weird OCD, neurotic flows and bad ideas and frustration and angst and all these things. So Kyle, before we jump into that topic, tell us a little bit more about you, a little bit more about StormGuard, so everyone can get to know you a bit before we jump in.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. And thanks for having me on. I joined StormGuard back in 2010, like you said, as a salesperson, and worked my way through a variety of roles in the business, ultimately getting recruited into the franchise side after they decided to franchise that business model. So I came out of that business model into franchising as the subject matter expert to really just help guide creation of the training and the processes of everything that we do here in the business. And I spent a number of years as a franchise consultant working directly with those owners. And really, I found that I just get a lot of satisfaction out of helping people. When I don't know how many years ago, I heard something that said, the more people you can help, the more you're going to succeed. And what's great about moving from working in the business into the side, and why I really love being here, is I get to help a lot of people, help the owners out and help them with their employees, and obviously all the homeowners that we're serving all across the country.
Yeah, I love that. And guys, StormGuard, 37 active locations, more territories than that, obviously, several multi-unit owners, but primarily owner-operator, growing business. And you guys have been around for a while. You guys have weathered a couple of COVID storms, no pun intended, right? The StormGuard guys, but also just one thing I want to share, because you mentioned this, but most people don't know this. I happen to work quite a bit in the roofing space also. Roofers, your local roofers, and roofing in general has the worst reputation, the highest number of Better Business Bureau complaints filed out of every industry and that touches a home. And interestingly enough, like StormGuard is not that. Right. And that's one thing I love about franchising in the roofing space specifically, is that it needs someone to help legitimize the trade and systematize the trade and improve the reputation of the trade. Because roofers are notorious for, like, I'm going to come through and slap a roof on, I'm going to invoice and I'm out. Enjoy, and they're bad communicators. So you guys have really built a model around fixing a lot of those problems that are just endemic in this industry of roofing. I really like that about what you guys have built.
Yeah, absolutely. Communication, transparency, those are definitely things that we take into consideration in every process when we're helping out homeowners, because you're right. Folks can generally be a little distrusting of their run-of-the-mill roofer, and we absolutely enjoy coming and wowing folks just by, providing the services in the way that we do.
Yeah, I love that. Well, kudos to you guys for building a good brand that's growing. And let's dive into this topic. Again, just to reiterate, how do we help franchise owners focus on the top or the most important priorities over the menial stuff that they tend to get caught up on, right? Mm-hmm. It's a big challenge. And I wanted to, Kyle, if you don't mind, maybe share a little bit about your experience. Let's turn back the hand of time a little bit to before you guys had the system in place you have now. What were some of the challenges that were pretty common you guys would face that was indicative of this issue, that they were just focusing on the wrong things? Share a little bit about that.
Yeah. So, earlier on, before, I'd say we started kind of identifying this issue, you would just find that, well, there's a lot of opportunity in home services and construction. People ask, if you come out to a home and you're in any trade, a homeowner can ask you to complete any of the services. You might be a roofer, but hey, can you do
Yeah.
this? Can you do that?
Yeah.
And sometimes it's easy to say yes to everything, and then you end up taking on a lot of work that you really just weren't prepared to complete, or it was really a distraction from the core business that you're in. So that was a big challenge, and we would see that very frequently in the system.
Mhm. Yeah, and let's talk about that for a minute. How common is that, right? If you're listening into this, if you're in painting and then someone's like, "Hey, can you guys start doing, deck staining?" Well, maybe that's not your thing, and now you're distracted and your crews are busy doing something they're not efficient at, and now you're actually your bottom line is not near as good as it should because you're killing time, and opportunity cost is eating away, right? You should have done another roof instead of replace the gutters on that house or whatever it was. That you guys do gutters too, though, don't you?
We do gutters. Yeah. We do everything exterior on the home. So roofing, siding, windows, gutters
Nice.
as well. So yeah.
So what were some things that were coming up when people ask like, "Hey, can you fix my fence while you're here? The wind blew what kind of stuff?"
build fences, build decks, do kitchen remodels, bathroom remodels, fire restoration. I mean, if people can get a hold of a contractor and they have a good experience, they don't want to let that contractor go. They want you to do as much as you can. Okay. So
I'm that guy too. My handyman guy, we've had to do a couple of things. He did my sprinklers. I'm like, "Hey, can you move a wall for me?" He's like, "Sure," but like, is that really what he's good at? I don't know. I should probably find out.
yep, absolutely.
That's funny. So okay, a lot of people were getting distracted by additional services that weren't really core to your business model. What are some other things you were finding that people were getting distracted by, and not like things they thought were priorities that really were unimportant to their success?
I could say, like, on the marketing side, there was spins on different marketing campaigns that weren't in alignment with the greater strategy. So that can get really tough for anyone purchasing a franchise. And a lot of times you can do things kind of like random acts of marketing where it's disjointed. You don't have alignment between all of your efforts in one direction. So there was distraction in that. The owner found some of the owners may find themselves just pulled in multiple directions because of, you go to a trade show and they come up with this new idea, or you hear about a new tool or product that could possibly make things so much better. And hey, let's go over that direction. And then you go spend a bunch of time over there, but because it didn't align with the core business, then it was just a distraction and it didn't actually take them toward where they're trying to get.
I've got to tell you this because I have a unique perspective. We have lots and lots of units operating in our software, and so I get to see every now and then if I'm doing like a demo or I'm just popping into a client account, I'll look at like just some basic dashboarding and see, well, what are the lead attribution reports for like half dozen franchises? Let's see how things are going in this brand. And every now and then I see stuff like church bulletin, high school band. Like I see these like super random things, and and it's almost always one lead, right, that comes from this thing. And I might be looking like a quarter or 2 quarters worth of data. I'm like, I wonder how much money that franchise operator spent to advertise in his or her church bulletin. That's fascinating. I'm not saying they're bad ideas, right? But like, it kind of cracks me up how random some of the stuff is.
Yeah.
Like poker group or like something just super weird that shows up on these reports. So I totally see it. It's in the data, and it can cause a lot of mayhem too, because you'll get somebody who's not just, the worst part is if they have a tiny bit of success, right, with something random,
Yes.
because then every FAQ, the advisory committee meeting, if you don't know what a FAQ is, or every time you have a conference or regional mixer or a training, they're like, "Hey," and they want to preach about this random thing that they just did that generated 1 sale. And as a franchise, you're like, "Would you just stop? How about you just follow up on the leads that we generated for you? Let's just do that first and generate money from what you've already spent." Like, I see it all the time, but it's funny.
Absolutely. It's super common. And yeah, those church bulletins, it's like, those are great if your target audience goes to that church and you've identified it and aligned that effort into your overall marketing plan. But if you just said, "Hey, let's throw something up here and let's throw something up there,"
Yeah.
then now that's when we kind of start getting into a little bit of trouble. But that's what we really were trying to identify. Like, how do we better ensure people are focusing on the right things and that those things are aligned.
Yeah, well, I love it. So tell me, like you just kind of recued the question. So you guys identified this problem. You start to see the impact. It creates ripples, right? What were
Yeah.
some of the impacts? So units weren't performing as well as they could because they were getting distracted. What's the impact of that random acts of marketing, random acts of operations, randomness in general, a lack of focusing on the right priorities? What impact did that have on you as a franchisor and on your operations and your FBCs and the support team?
Well, you end up trying to support a lot of different things that haven't been done with enough repetition to master it.
Mhm.
So it can really spread your support thin because you're trying to master all these things that ultimately weren't part of the original model. You're
Yeah.
trying to be able to support. And at StormGuard, our consultants, we are very much not the checklist kind of consultant. We're going in and our consultants are working with the owners and really involved with them and almost to some degree like a partner to them in running that business. So when you have that degree of commitment, you want to do everything you can to help. And when you get pulled all in 27 different directions, it actually kind of reduces the quality of the help that you're providing.
Yeah, I like what you just said because that's the ultimate result, right? Is when you get spread super thin, you can't make an impact. I heard someone once say, if you blunt the edge of an arrow enough, it'll never penetrate, right? And that's part of the problem. Like they're not penetrating the market, they're not hitting the target clients. You built a whole business model in franchising around this concept, and
Absolutely.
then they stop following that, so they're not getting the results that they should get, right?
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And then you see it spills over into their culture and their franchise because the lack of focus from leadership causes the employees to not know what exactly they should be focused on. And then because they're not in a place where they feel like I'm certain I'm performing great in my job because I have very clear direction and I can say, here's my actions and here's my expectations and they're in alignment, I feel a little bit fearful. So perhaps, I need to start looking elsewhere for a job where I can get into a more comfortable situation where I'm not worried as to whether or not I'm doing a good job. So it really flowed, you know, into the, very many directions is, when you have that challenge that I think every business owner goes through at some point.
Yeah, well, and what's interesting is when you've got a culture like that where staff are wary, they're not sure of the direction, they don't believe in the vision or whatever the case may be, or they feel like I don't trust this guy, he's all over the board. I've had that boss several times. It's not who goes, it's who stays you should be worried about, right? Because the people that are the talented ones are like, I can do better and I'm out.
Hmm.
But the people who stay are the ones who are just like, hey, I'm here for the ride. Thanks for the paycheck. Like usually you don't keep the best people when you've got an environment like that. So you can create a kind of a downward spiral of staffing and performance because you're losing your top talent, which would otherwise help correct the problem.
That's
So
exactly right. Yep. That's
yeah.
exactly right.
Well, Kyle, tell me about the solution because you guys have a unique approach to the way I mean, it won't sound unique at first, but the way you guys deploy this, I think is really powerful. So what did you guys decide to do?
So initially, what we were doing every year, we have what we call our strategic planning meetings, and they're optional for our franchise owners. And they get to all come together for a couple days in one location, and we put together their strategic plans for that following year and ensure that it's in alignment with their long-term goals. And we did that for a couple years, and then ultimately, the real solution that we found with a lot of research and input from a lot of different places was the EOS system. And if you haven't heard of that, that's the Entrepreneurial Organization System, and that's put together by a man named Gino Wickman. And what
Mhm.
it does is it actually provides an entire framework for you to run your organization. It's not about the products that you're providing or the processes. It's the fact that you should be filling in all these blanks with your business to have a healthy structure of your organization. So that's what we use. So we found it and we read the book at corporate and we said, hey, this is something that could really be great for us. So the first thing that we did is we started running the EOS system at corporate, and we ran it for a little over a year. just to become familiar with it to the degree that we could help our franchises, so that our franchise consultants knew all the chapters of the book, the traction book that's the primary book in the EOS series, and so that we could help. So then after about a year, a little over a year, we had our next strategic planning meeting, and the EOS system was the subject of that meeting. So we brought everyone in to the meeting, and we started just by going through. We had everyone read the books ahead of time, and we identified the specific elements of the EOS system that were going to be the most impactful in our system. We started there. We just, kind of identified that first step, and we started moving forward, and just bit by bit, we kind of have worked our way through the EOS system. And we're in the journey right now. We've started the journey in 2020. And the great thing about the EOS system is I think that there is unlimited potential to continue to make your business and your organization run better.
Yeah, I agree. Well, it's a process and it's like it's a framework. You said the right word. It's a framework for decision-making, planning. So our organization, let's see, when did we start? We rolled out EOS at Client Tether, late 2020. I think it was Q4 of 2020 is when we started rolling it out. And it's same thing, like we're, obviously tech companies totally different than a franchise system, but we started to see, okay, like there's misalignment here and here, like different ways where we were inefficient because we weren't aligned as well as we should be. And I forget who it was who was like, hey, you should look at EOS. I'd heard several people refer to it. We had a member of our operations team at the time said, hey, I know EOS. We should take a look at this. After a little bit of research and discussion, we're like, hey, this is aligned well with our goal setting and all these other aspects of our business. Let's deploy this process. So we kind of went through the same thing with our team and rolled out, we went through what the heck is EOS, traction. I started reading through the books and learning the lingo. We even had a consultant join us after we started deploying, and he gave us some feedback about our level 10 meetings. So like we've rolled it out, and I can't tell you that it's been like the core thing that changed everything for us, because we were already on a good trajectory, but boy, has it made alignment issues go away with our. So tell us about this journey. So corporate alignment, you guys then ran it for about a year, so you could be experts in it and well-versed, deployed it to the franchisees. And now tell me, how did that go? Because a lot of franchise systems, they just operate with EOS in the corporate office, the franchisor level, and because it's hard to deploy. So tell us a little bit about how did you deploy it? And what were the run-ins, like the issues you had deploying it, and how did you fix those? I think that's a fear a lot of franchisors have, is how the heck do I roll this thing out to 100 locations where everybody's a little bit different?
Right. So for us, our way to deploy this within the locations was really first identifying the pain with the locations and saying, hey, these are a lot of issues, and we're all on the same page that these are problems that we need to solve. And we found certain locations were extremely open to this concept because we were on the same page, and they get it. They knew they needed that a tighter organizational structure. And so we started there, and we really focused on having success with those folks and then promoting that success in the system. It was really interesting. So something that we've done for years is mid-year, really quarterly reviews of the franchise. So we would sit down with the owner and just go through everything, and sales, operations, marketing, just look at all the numbers, financials. And every year when we do this, or every quarter, there would be these aha moments of, wow, that was really great to learn that. And then they would take that information and then they would apply it to their actions, and they'd find great success. And so we would be elated with this idea that, hey, we can, get everyone refocused on the big picture of every part of their business. And then they can take that and go forth and conquer. I guess they can do something that they're going to get some better results from. But we sat back one day and said, well, what if they knew about all this all the time? And that's what the EOS system does. Now, when we have those quarterly review meetings with the franchise owner, there are very few surprises, if any,
Mhm.
because they've been monitoring their business in such a healthier way. The EOS system approach to metrics and how they put them on the scorecard and assign accountability to individuals. I've heard the phrase "the devil's in the details," and when it comes to metrics in your business, how you apply them, those details are super critical, and it provided us something that was just awesome. So we immediately started seeing in the locations that implemented the EOS system that their grasp of their metrics was so much more than it was before, because they had gone through and spent time understanding, am I looking at a bunch of numbers that really matter? Am I looking at numbers that are to some degree redundant in what they're indicating, and eliminating it and focusing on what matters the most, and then seeing those numbers every single week? And it's just, and that was a big piece that really helped us. It really just allowed for better focus and clarity, and focus on the things that were really mattering to the business at any given time.
I love that. Let me take you one step back, because part of what I'm hearing you say is when you started rolling out EOS, you didn't immediately say, okay, all 37 locations, we're doing this now. Did you kind of do it in phases where you handpicked some people you knew had some issues where this could be a real solution and you felt they'd be receptive? So you kind of piloted it with a smaller group? Or did you actually unilaterally say, here we go, everybody, let's roll this thing out across the whole system? How did you guys approach that? Because I know there are some mixed emotions about unilateral changes when you're trying to put something this big out.
So the first thing that I did was, well, we found a location, and one of the franchisees, I love the relationships that we have with the franchise owners. There's a few of them that I have really close relationships with, and one of them, our St. Louis location, actually, he was all about it and he jumped right on board. So he actually began his own testing of it, and we were collaborating a lot along the way. And
Nice.
along the way, we were learning and how that would apply. So I was getting information specifically about, application in the franchise, and taking note of all of that, so that when we finally got to strategic planning that year, we had, about, I'd say, I had a handful, maybe 15 of our locations come into the meeting. And that was our time where we would introduce, or not introduce, but really sell them on implementing this. And what we found was, out of that group, we had a little over 50% jump right on it and just start rolling it out. Because ultimately, anyone that I believe that anyone buying a franchise, they're looking for order and they're looking for proven process, right? So we don't have a desire to unilaterally force new concepts into the franchise system, because we know that that's not what those folks are really looking for. If they were looking for brand new and untested, they may not have bought a franchise, right? So
Right. Yeah.
so it's like, hey, I have to respect that. So we get the volunteers, and then we work hard with those volunteers to find success, and then we promote that success for the rest of the folks in the system that just wanted to say, hey, I love the idea, but I'd really like to wait and see the specific impacts. And some other folks spend some time translating, the concept to that practical application in the business. So
I love your model. So let's talk about that, because when we do pilots of our, like, a technology rollout, we try to use the same model. So I was curious how you were going to describe that, where asking for volunteers can be powerful. Sometimes you got to be careful as a franchisor. The same people volunteer all the time, and sometimes they're the franchisees that nobody wants to listen to. So you want to be selective about them. But you guys essentially said, hey, we had one guy who you did almost like an alpha test with the St. Louis guy. He kind of proved the model and helped you, give you feedback along the way. Your ally, a corporate store, is great at doing this, but the corporate store is part of corporate. So often franchisees don't want to hear about corporate store success, right? Or corporate location in your case. But you guys had a pilot group of 7 or 8 franchise owners that decided to roll this thing out. How long did you work with them and have them work on the system and test it before you started sharing results with the network?
I'd say, gosh, well, from the St. Louis location, after he was probably 6 months into it,
Mhm.
we started sharing and talking about the success that he was finding just in the conversations that occur on a weekly basis between the consultant and the franchise owners. And then, over time, once we had to go through and really work on the scorecard and fill in a lot of the blanks on the vision traction organizer. I think one of the more interesting parts of rolling the EOS system out as a franchisor to the franchise owners is understanding on that vision traction organizer, which is your strategic map for those of you listening, that talks about where your vision and your core values and your mission and all that is. It was identifying where do we need to lock down and say, this is what corporate has put into the vision traction organizer based off of the franchise model. And what do we leave open for them to fill in as the location owner, that franchise owner, and being understanding there. And that's what helped a lot of the alignment in the system, was not having franchise owners all running completely foreign to each other's strategic plans. So, a lot of those major pieces of it were filled in, but when it came to the more, specific to their region or location or just the number of years in business that they had the ability to fill that in. And they, it got really good reception from the locations, because they were like, wow, this is great, because all of this conceptual thinking that would have been required to fill in something like this, I hadn't set the time aside for. And you've done this for me, and now we're all kind of aligned under a unified strategy.
Yeah. And yet, so you guys created the framework, right, in the VTO, the Vision Traction Organizer, for them to fill in their local flavor of that same strategic plan, right? It's not like you guys gave them a blank slate and said, well, here's a template, fill it out. You're like, hey, here's some things, right? You guys gave them and coached them with the content you preloaded that then they could take and personalize to their local markets. Am I reading that right?
That's you're right on. That's exactly what we did.
Yeah, I love that you did that. And anyone listening in, like some of you guys are EOS lovers. It's a big thing in this franchising industry. I kept hearing about it when we rolled it out internally. Just going through the process of establishing what are our core values and making sure we communicate those and put them in front of people and talk about them, and we make decisions based upon them and coach people in the organization based upon them. Like that opened up a few doors and thoughts for us, where we realized, hey, maybe like we had some personnel things that we adjusted, where we realized, like, you're not operating with transparency and you're not winning as a team and you're not partnering with our clients. Like maybe this isn't the right spot. Like there's another place, where you can thrive, but it's not here. Like that's like we had all sorts of things like that starting to come out of our organization just from that one piece. And you can imagine in a franchise system the power of unlocking the potential of the organization by giving them alignment and then multiplying that by 37 units, right? Like the impact of this can be massive, but I'll bet there were some struggles, right? As you guys were rolling this thing out, it doesn't just, even though you templatized it and coached them, tell us a little bit about some of the struggles that you guys had to fight through to help the franchise owners really deploy this properly.
Yeah, you mentioned it, just not to repeat what you said, but around the staffing side and having to make adjustments, it will cause those kind of challenges to stare right at you. So when you get into actually rolling out EOS into your organization and you use some of the tools to better understand, do I have the right person in the right seat?
Yeah.
Some of this can really reveal some root cause issues in your business that you've been running around, really putting band-aids on the symptoms, treating symptoms and not cause. So then it causes you to have to face something that's going to require a lot more effort, like replacing a key person. So that was a challenge. Adhering to the some of the system to the letter. I think some folks, when they get something like a process or a program, they take it and they say, hey, I'm going to implement this exactly as it is prescribed.
Mhm.
And then maybe sometime down the road where when I feel like I know enough, I might make a couple adjustments. So I'd say one of the challenges is keeping people in that state of mind and not willing or changing the plan or changing the recipe before executing what was given. So, trying to keep the locations just focused in one area and doing that piece and then learning from it and moving forward. But there was a challenge in that.
Mhm.
You know, I'd say with our business being somewhat seasonal, uh, we seem to our staffing can really increase in the warmer months, right? Selling roofs in the up north in the wintertime, there's not a lot to do. Uh, so as you go through those cycles, it's difficult to keep people on the routine and regimen in the off season. So being able to really think about that and how it applied to our business was really important. And you know I think that's something that honestly is still somewhat of a challenge because we may get everyone rolling and using the system. And then, hey, winter's going to come again. So I think it'll be a repetitive thing where we're trying to get people you know, back on the program at the start of each season.
Yeah, yeah, I could see that because you almost check out a little bit in the industry when there's nothing much you can do. But that's
Exactly.
that's go time for strategic planning and like working on the office, working on the system, working on the team. Like that's wow, that's an opportunity
Yeah.
missed if they don't keep focused on it. So I could see that. Well, let's
Hmm.
talk. I mean, Kyle, if you don't mind, share some of the benefits and tell us a little bit like how did EOS and rolling this thing out start to impact the units first? Because every successful franchise system focuses on unit success. So let's do that first. How did it impact them?
Accountability, I'd say that was one of the first big pieces, being able, the way that the system clearly places accountability for everything that's going on in the business in the right place, and really helps you through that. It helps you eliminate
Mhm.
shared accountability. If everybody owns it, nobody owns it, that kind of thing. That was really cool to see. And ultimately, just even on my team, and I know they saw this in the locations as well, but my direct uh, experience in this was seeing folks that were on the franchisor side that had metrics and things identified, really focus on those metrics, and it just resulted in a much higher satisfaction in their job and their performance. And you look out into the locations and it's just clarity. If you've ever heard of the Gallup 12 questions that lead to employee engagement, question number one, and Gallup did has studied something like 3 million employees to come up with those 12 questions. And those 12 questions are the centerpiece of a lot of different HR programs. But question number one, the most important question is, I know what is expected of me at work. And so when you have the EOS system in place, it promotes a very clear understanding of expectations. And I know it can sound, for some people, holding people accountable and telling them what their expectations are may not seem to be what's going to engage and make people more excited to come to work, but it actually is. And so that was a huge benefit, just massive. Some of the other, I mentioned the part with the scorecard and the metrics.
Yeah.
Eliminating unnecessary metrics. I can't talk enough about that. We always think about, what do we need to start doing? What can we do here? And what can we add on? But what you can find is a lot of your productivity and a lot of your efficiency doesn't come from doing new things, doing more things. It comes from doing less. It comes from simplifying. And the EOS system absolutely allows you to simplify the instruments you're looking at, if you imagine it that way, when it comes to your business. So you're all those numbers and all those metrics, well, you can get overwhelmed and you can end up in a meeting where you're just talking about different metrics. But if one's off, do you really do anything about it? Or do you move on to the next metric and, hey, I've got 50 metrics I'm looking at, so I found enough this week that looked
Mhm.
good that I don't make any changes. And I think you need to, I think anyone that's in that situation really would love the EOS system because it gets you out of that habit. It's just,
Yeah.
it's productivity. It's productivity. It's the system that really helps just push things forward. And again, it's that alignment, it's just so much improvement.
I love it. It's interesting. I mentioned to you before, I think that I used to coach high school baseball. I was the hitting mechanics coach. And so for the varsity team. And so I would, I can pick apart a swing, right? I can watch it. I can watch a couple of slow-mo videos, front side angle, and I can say, look, here are three things, like, let's work on this, right? But there's a big difference between when you're coaching on mechanics to correct issues, and this is the same in like coaching a franchise, right? If I see a kid swing, let's say I have like a ninth grader, a freshman who I see a swing and I'm like, oh heavens, like you're dipping your shoulder, you're leaning forward, your hands are sliding out, you're casting, your foot movement is wrong, you're not loading properly, you're not pushing your, like I could find 18 things in a freshman swing that are all messed up. But
Mm-hmm.
if I give him 18 things to work on as a hitting coach, he's going nowhere. In fact, he's going to get frustrated. And I see this happen a lot in franchising where we have these super robust scorecards and analytics, and the business coaches are going to focus on 7 of those things every time you talk. Nothing happens because there's no focused effort. It's like the magnifying glass. We don't ever get the beam focused. You're not going to burn anything. It's just going to slowly warm up the concrete. So I think that you nailed something that's really important. Is EOS can help franchise systems focus on the right metrics. Also creates a culture of accountability, which I love. A culture of accountability is very different than and it's more of a performance culture than it is a compliance culture. And
Mm-hmm.
sometimes I think this is a tool that can help us break that mold. A compliance culture is cancerous. Like it's not going to help you thrive and grow. It stifles productivity and creativity. So I love what you're sharing. And as we're wrapping up, because I'd love to get a couple of parting thoughts from you, Kyle, as you guys were tackling this issue of how do I get my franchisees to focus on the right things more than the shiny object or the busy things. Tell us a little bit more about, like, what would you recommend to a brand that's considering how to solve this problem today? What are a couple of things they could do right now that would help them to move the needle on a project like this?
Well, if they're considering EOS system, I'd say one of the biggest things for me is it will make your owners look good in their business.
Mm-hmm.
How many times do people sit down and have meetings, and those meetings go on to on a tangent? You're talking about something very granular, not about the business as a whole. You don't have enough content for those meetings. Or how great would it be to have a big strategy put together that you can talk to your team about and get them all moving in the same direction? So this enables those owners to look so much better and be well set up as the leader of that franchise, and to be able to garner support from the folks that are working for them and belief and faith in them. That's a big piece of hiring. Is you got to be someone that someone's going to look to and say, that person's going to lead me to success. This is the horse I want to tie my wagon to. And I think what it does is it really shows that that owner is the right person, to work for as well. I think that's a big piece of it. Anybody that's looking to just take care of some of these issues, utilizing the scorecard and the accountability chart. I mean, the first thing I would do if I was anyone even thinking about this is read What the Heck is EOS? That is the introduction book to EOS system. It's a really easy read, and it'll give you a grasp of the system front to back, and then you can make a decision as to whether or not you want to really get into it. But the elements that I think are really the most critical right out of the gate are the accountability chart, the scorecard, and those level 10 meetings. And implementing those 3 things in the locations first, you're going to see a very rapid, I think I mentioned this early, or maybe before when we were talking, Dave, but you'll see a really rapid increase in self-awareness of their business, of themselves, their own behaviors. So then what you're doing is you're really supporting and enabling them to find, their success, versus trying to be the one that's constantly pushing and pulling them there, because you've got the vision, you've got the plan, you've been in the franchise, you know what they need to do. But when you give them this organization, or this system to improve their organization, they work so much better. There was a study, there's research done on this, but they say that people cannot really be creative without boundaries. So if you were to have a room full of 50 people and you just said, hey, I need you to make art, you're not going to get a lot. However, if you said, hey, I need you to paint a picture, I want it to be based off of this style, and here's your canvas, this is the size of the canvas, you're going to get everyone in that room to come up with something, and you'll have far more creativity. And I think that's a really important piece of this, is the psychological impact of having parameters to work within.
Wow. Yeah, that's pretty profound. I didn't expect you to be a philosopher, Kyle, as we wrap this up. That's pretty deep if you think about it. And franchising is supposed to be the parameters, right? And I can see that the value of rolling out EOS in the franchise unit level, which is not super common. I know guys like, Jerry Henley is working on that. And there are a couple of very few others that focus on deploying EOS at the unit level, because it's hard, but you're creating efficient boundaries, but parameters to operate within, measurement systems, self-correction guidance, right? Level 10 meetings, like all those tools can create these healthy boundaries for franchise to then innovate within, while they're staying hyper-focused on the core priorities,
Exactly.
They're not generating top-line revenue and also effective bottom line income, then like what else matters? Honestly, if happiness, want them to be enjoying and be passionate about what they do. If those three things are not in line, or two things, making money and being happy, then why are they in franchising? They won't last. You'll need to resell that territory sooner or later. So
yep, absolutely. And and that's what we love here, is really helping people find success, and be happy and not overwhelmed along the way. And this was something that really, it's a very it's the perfect tool for the job.
Yeah, I'd have to agree with you. I'm not sure why more people aren't doing it, but guys, I hope you got a lot from Kyle today. Kyle, you've been awesome. If they want to connect with you, find you on, I'm assuming, LinkedIn, and
absolutely,
connect with you there.
Yep, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. That's definitely the best place to find me.
Okay, well, you've been great. Thanks for sharing that journey with us and some of those insights and the impact. And guys, appreciate you listening to another episode of the Advisory Board Podcast.